絆色心と心約束の場所きっと導くわ伝えたい伝えきれない果てない想いはあなた
When attempting to judge how good an anime is before watching it, there are a couple of things that you can keep in mind based off reading a brief synopsis. Firstly, if the anime is a high school drama, the chances of it being shit raises significantly, especially if it was made post-2007. With the advent of shows like K-On! And Lucky Star, the high school drama anime, slice of life or no, has become an overused standby for the industry. It is very safe to produce one of these shows, though the quality of the production usually takes a hit because of it. Secondly, if the anime is based off a visual novel, the chances of it being shit also raises significantly, as this is another one of those safe avenues for producers. Visual novels have an already existing, pre-established fanbase who will buy the anime whether it is good or not, which can sometimes hinder the production if someone in there has the bright idea going, oh, it doesn't need to be perfect, they're going to buy it anyway. Now, with that said, these two factors do not necessarily guarantee that any specific show will be shit. In fact, it is this reviewer's opinion that there are some high school visual novel adaptations that are f***ing awesome. But today we are looking at a show from 2010 that has one factor that screws all of this up. Vampires. This is gonna hurt. Ladies, gentlemen, and others, my name is Arcada, and welcome to Glass Reflection. Today, the high school visual novel adaptation, known as Fortune Arterial. Let's jam. The setting, like most of the anime as a whole, is nothing to write home about. The show takes place on an island out in nowhere land at a school prestigious enough to have an entire building for the student council that just happens to be larger than most of the buildings on my university campus. Which means we can take a fairly good guess that the families that send their children here are very, very rich. Other than that, there isn't too much else to mention. Well, except for the vampires. Ah yes, vampires, because you need something to make your show somewhat unique and stand out from all the other bland high school anime out there. The vampires in Fortune Arterial are not the kind that go around killing demons like Alucard, nor are they only there to begin romantic relationships with the opposite sex, a la Twilight. They take this middle ground of not wanting to really interfere in the lives of humans, unless of course their identities are found out, and in this version of vampiric lore, their special abilities, beyond the usual super strength, include the ability to erase memories from the minds of humans, thus making people forget that they just saw some vampires. Convenient, no? First character up for discussion is Kohei, the male lead and transfer student to the wonderful school in which the show takes place. As Kohei is the male protagonist of a visual novel adaptation, he takes the place of the player character from the visual novel, with all the Mary Sue-like qualities that entails. He has boundless optimism, the ability to do superhuman feats when the plot calls for it, and he has more or less no flaws. And of course, every female character wants to sleep with him, whether they admit it or not. The problem is that he's so predictable that it's just plain boring.
Bored now.
Next up is Erika, the voluptuous female protagonist. She is also a vampire. Hooray! But oh no, she's a good little vampire. She doesn't want to suck anyone's blood or take on minions. She just wants to act like a human and live a normal life. How sweet. To her credit, her story is practically the only interesting thing about the entire show, and I do find it funny that the story puts far more focus on her because of this than the real protagonist Kohei. She doesn't save the show from mediocrity, but she at least stops you from falling asleep. The supporting characters, like everything else, aren't much to talk about. You have the basic tropes of the blabbermouth and sheltered girl, and then you have Erika's brother, who I swear is related to Tamaki from Moron. He just has that similar look to him, and he's obnoxious as all hell. Main differences between them, of course, are that he's both a vampire and a manipulative douchebag. So, there you go.
Douchebag.
I could just list off the general story of any given school-based anime and it would most likely be more interesting than what you would watch here. The story mostly deals with the daily lives of the student council and the various events that the council sets up and prepares for over the course of the year. And I'm being completely honest when I say that that's mostly it. The remaining bits of story involve romantic subplots that are copy-pasted over from the visual novel and then cut down to size because Kohei can't have a romantic relationship with everyone. It's not like this is school days or anything. I usually find that when all else fails with a show, at least the animation is pretty good. I can't even say that this time. I can't pinpoint exactly why I dislike it. It mainly just looks flat to me. It reminds me a lot of Air in that the designs are unrefined. The colors also look off at bit places, like Erika's hair, for example. I know that in real life a Japanese person would not have blonde hair, and it's become one of those things in anime where the color of a person's hair should be ignored. But even then, her hair looks more gold than blonde, and it just seems a little off, like it's on the wrong side of the uncanny valley, and I just don't like it. The opening is the high point of the show's animation, but even then, it looks like a cheap Kyoto animation imitation, minus the individual spaces for the characters. It's not really something that stands out on its own. There's nothing particularly remarkable about this soundtrack, which is depressing because even in mediocre soundtracks, I can find at least one song that I would listen to on its own. The soundtrack was composed by Takaaki Anzai, whose only other major soundtrack was for a show called Recorder and Ranzel, which came out in early 2012. While I never heard that soundtrack, if it's anything like this one, he seems to be more for quantity rather than quality. It works in some cases, but, well, just not this one. To be perfectly blunt and honest about this show, there is nothing special or unique about it. The animation is average at best, and the same goes for the soundtrack. The characters are all stereotypes that any visual novel adaptation would have, and there's nothing particularly unique about them. The story is uninspired, spending far too much time on the daily activities of the student council rather than the mystical vampires that are supposed to be the show's selling point. And if I wanted to watch a show about a student council, I'd watch Mideka Box or something, not this. And the worst thing I think about the show is that the aforementioned selling point, being the vampires, is barely focused on. They are mentioned often enough so that you know that some of the characters are indeed vampires, but focus isn't really put onto that fact until the last few episodes. Even then, the plot comes up with an ending that you could predict almost a mile away, and it just wasn't satisfying. I didn't finish the series with any sense of accomplishment, and honestly just felt like the whole thing was a waste of my time. So, with that in mind, I have meticulously calculated values for the category of story, characters, animation, sound, and my own personal enjoyment, which, after tossing that into a fire that was lit using every page of Twilight in the general vicinity, leaves me awarding Fortune Arterial with an overall rating of 5.02 out of 10, and a recommendation to f*** it, because unless you found yourself somewhat compelled by this show, it really is not worth your time. However, that is just my opinion, and there may be people who disagree, and as such it is my job to inform you that while the show has yet to be licensed and therefore is not available on DVD, if your country has access to Crunchyroll, you can find all 13 episodes available there to watch at your leisure. As for alternate anime recommendations, I give you the much more superior vampire anime Hellsing Ultimate, and though I don't recommend it personally, if you really do want something more romantic and Twilight-like, you can check out Vampire Knight, you strange person. And with that, I leave you. Until next time, ladies, gentlemen, and others, stay frosty.
愛しくて愛しすぎて恋ひとしずく思い紡いでく記憶の火を絶やさないで過去も未来も現在ももう一度あともう一度
douchebag, douchebag, douchebag.